Hello, everyone. My name is Mauricio Kobian, and I oversee study abroad advising at the UCLA International Education Office for Study Abroad. And I'll be leading today's Satisfying GEs Abroad webinar, which is part of our Global Learning Opportunities Week, during which we are showcasing a number of study abroad related resources and unique opportunities, including sessions on funding and scholarships, region-specific sessions, discipline-based sessions, as well as sessions around student identities, among others. This webinar will be available in the on-demand section of our Global Learning Opportunities Week website at ieo.ucla.edu/glow after its conclusions, as well as on our YouTube channel, UCLA Study Abroad. This will be helpful to access any of the links we share or reviewing any of the content. So again, welcome. I'm representing the UCLA International Education Office, the one-stop shop for undergraduate study abroad opportunities. At our office, you can consult with study abroad advisors and coordinators. We have an intake team that can also address general questions. We can advise you on specific course offerings that are available when you're comparing two specific programs, talk to you a little bit about the housing opportunities, how meals work, how funding works. We can discuss all those topics with UCLA students. And we can also connect Bruins with other study abroad returnees, essentially students who have already studied abroad, had an amazing time, and are willing to share a little bit about the specific program that you're interested in. Or sometimes we can connect students with like peers. So if you're a specific major, we might be able to connect you with another student who's your same major who studied abroad. As I shared, this webinar is part of our Global Learning Opportunities Week, GLOW, which is running from October 26th through the 30th, where we're showcasing a number of series and webinars on the topics that I already shared. Again, you can access this as ieo.ucla.edu/glow. So here's our agenda for today. Welcome, which we just covered. I'll adjust a little bit about COVID-19 in the context of study abroad. A Study Abroad 101 refresher. What are UCLA GEs? Why attempt GEs abroad? How to find GEs abroad, and when and how to petition general education requirements. So, study abroad and COVID-19. Essentially, as of today, and things can change tomorrow, they can change next week. Summer 2021 programs and on are scheduled to run. We are continuously monitoring the safety of our programs, assessing day by day, week by week on, whether we're going to be able to run study abroad programs successfully for UCLA students. We want to make sure that the safety of our students and our faculty are a priority. The study abroad office is sensitive to student timelines. We know that by certain times you will need to make financial commitments, and we want to be able to provide as much information to students as possible before needing to make any of those commitments. We've also readjusted some of our deadlines and timeframes to account for these challenging times and challenging deadlines that we now have. One of the other ways that we're supporting students as well, for example, those seeking to study abroad during the academic year, we're coordinating with the registrar's office, where students are able to, enroll in their UCLA classes while they're, for the term that they would be abroad, while planning for studying abroad at the same time, just in case if the program falls through, students can more easily return back to campus if that's what they wish to do. Unfortunately, that enrollment wouldn't be able to maintain while you're actually on the study abroad program. We would have to drop any UCLA enrollments before the actual start of your study abroad program. But again, this is one of the ways that we're hoping to support students through this process. There are virtual alternatives that are being developed as well for select study abroad programs. More information on these virtual alternatives are going to be forthcoming at our IEO website and in November. That's where we'll highlight essentially what virtual opportunities would exist. Study abroad, as always, required flexibility and patience, but this year more than ever, it is definitely going to be required simply because as you all know, there's a lot of unknown factors and things that can change from one moment to another. And it's definitely, this planning process is going to require an extra flexibility and extra patience. So thank you for that. Last note that I want to make on study abroad and COVID is renewing and applying for a passport. The U.S. Department of State has long backlog of application processing, that hasn't taken place. So while typically the processing time would be something like 6 to 8 weeks, right now it's taking a few months. So anybody that's interested in studying abroad this coming summer 2021 or even fall 2021, we urge you to start looking into renewing or applying for a passport as soon as possible. If you wouldn't be traveling on a US passport, I'm sure other offices for those respective countries have had delays as well. So we do encourage you to look into it as soon as you can. So Study Abroad 101 refreshers. We've asked participants to first explore our Study Abroad 101 webinar that was already led and that's already online. And that's where we cover the fundamentals for folks who are just starting this process. We hope that that's the case with most of you watching this webinar. This session is intended to complement the 101 webinar, but from a more topic specific focus. If you missed it, don't worry, you'll be fine. Though you may have a bunch of questions that are going to be left unanswered. I do encourage you to look over the recording on our GLOW website, but just so that you're able to follow our today's topic a little bit better, I am going to offer a few refreshers. So what's covered in the Study Abroad 101? Essentially, in the 101, we cover topics like the types of different programs that are available to UCLA students in detail, how credit transfers from these UCLA offerings, satisfying requirements, the cost of these programs and funding opportunities like financial aid, the application process, the timeline for applying, among other general topics. For this specific session, it's quite specific, and essentially today's session will simply focus on how to satisfy GEs on a study abroad program. The 101 can be viewed at our website /glow, and that's already available to you. So as a refresher, just a big picture, there's different program types, study abroad program types. Often some students might think that there's only one type of study abroad, but there really are dozens. And even then I won't cover them all, but I will cover sort of the more popular and common ones. First, you have the traditional university model. This is where students attend, for example, a school like University College London in the UK, and they take whichever courses they want with the local professors and local students at that institution. You're essentially a British student while you are abroad. This is an example where, let's say, a mechanical engineer student can go abroad and take 2 engineering courses that could fulfill potentially major requirements, and they take 2 courses potentially working on GEs. Next, you have our UCLA faculty-led programs. I describe these as experiential courses on the go with UCLA professors over the summer. The sample that I like to highlight here is, for example, our Histories of Paris program, where we have Professor Theo Ruiz, a UCLA professor, that doesn't really even teach in a classroom environment. Every day is a walking tour of Paris. They're showing you every nook and cranny and showing you the history behind, the city itself of Paris. So that's what you can expect from a UCLA faculty-led program. Each program is different from one another, but that's the kind of thing that UCLA faculty-led programs try to strive for. There are also new models of studying abroad. Now we have opportunities where students can intern for academic credit and make progress towards their degree. There are options where, a student might intern at a startup in Berlin, do business in Shanghai, or there are other opportunities where you can conduct fieldwork and take an ecology class in the rainforest of Costa Rica, as you can see from one of our pictures here. There's a cohort-based model that we also have. This is a special program called UCLA Global Cities. This is where a group of UCLA students go abroad to one of 3 different cities, and they get to meet local university students during the summer. And they all take courses at the local host university. They spend about 4 or 5 weeks there. Upon that conclusion, they all return, including the local students. They all come back to UCLA and take courses for summer session C. And the UCLA students reciprocate. Now you're showing them around what Los Angeles is like and what UCLA is like. There's also something called UC Center programs. These are offerings where you're taking courses exclusively with your UC peers, and the coursework is a lot more not more restrictive, but it's more structured. For example, on a program like this, you might be able to choose from 4 or 5 different classes, where in the traditional university immersion model, you get to pick from anything that's available at that university. When it comes to financial aid, I'll just address quickly the most common question that we receive. Can I use my UCLA financial aid for a study abroad program? And the answer is absolutely. Eligible students can use their UCLA financial aid to cover the cost of UC affiliated study abroad programs. The aid could be comprised of grants, loans, and scholarships. This all depends on a student's individual need and packaging and whether they apply to scholarships or not. During summer programs, grant funding is limited. There is still grant funding that eligible students might be able to take advantage of, but there are, there are limitations as well for summer programs. And generally, students must take a minimum of 8 units to be eligible for financial aid. When to apply, we generally tell students to look at as early as 9 months before the start of the program. It doesn't mean that you cannot apply 4 months before the start of the program, but the longer you wait, the less options are going to be available to you. The deadlines are going to vary from one program to another. For many of our programs, you could apply closer to the deadlines, but there are some very popular offerings as well that, the moment that registration or the application process opens, they fill up. So there's numerous opportunities. Is applying to study abroad competitive? Generally, I would say no. Most programs are first come, first serve. We do have some exceptions to those. But for the most part, it's a straightforward process. Sometimes it's just simply a registration process, especially for our faculty-led UCLA travel study programs. But one thing that I also want to highlight is sometimes students might be thinking that there's an essay involved or letters of recommendation or some other things that that are a lengthy process. There are a few programs for which we might ask those things for, but I would say 95% of our programs do not require something like that. So, what is available to students right now? At the moment, many of our summer and fall programs are already open. There are some that will further open in the month of November. And for those considering opportunities for winter, spring 2022, those generally are going to open around the first week of winter quarter. So what are general education requirements? I imagine that as UCLA students, you are already familiar to some extent with general education requirements, but I will cover some fundamentals here. And they're relevant to the process of being able to identify GEs abroad. So UCLA has 3 foundations for GEs, and there's subcategories within these. Depending on the school or college that you pertain to, you might be required to do a different number of these courses. For example, students in a particular school might be for society and culture here. You might be required to do 1 historical analysis, 1 social analysis, and then the option of another one between the 2 of those. Other students might only be required to do 1 from this particular foundation. To learn more about these individual foundations, I do strongly recommend to explore the link that you see here. That's registrar.ucla.edu/academics/GE-requirement. In that link, you'll be able to see a more detailed description of these foundations to sort of get a better understanding of what these are and sort of why specific courses are tied to these foundations and what kind of courses generally fall under this foundation. That's going to give you a better understanding of what is literary and culture analysis, what is historical analysis. At the link, you'll also be able to see what requirements does your individual school have as well. And generally speaking, I would say the GE courses are introductory and survey-like. They do not require any specialized background or prerequisites. At UCLA, most carry 5 UC quarter units. On rare occasion, you might find a course that carries 4 UC quarter units. Most are lower division, though there are a few exceptions. And actually, when you're studying abroad, you might find a number of upper division courses. It doesn't mean that you cannot petition those courses. I'm just sort of highlighting one of the patterns of what UCLA G courses generally what they look like. Now, for the purpose of today's presentation, I do want to distinguish that there are other things that sometimes students might, or even staff actually might refer to these things as GEs, but there is a distinction. And today we'll be focusing solely on GEs, but there are other things like writing 2, foreign language, diversity, technical breadth if you're in engineering. These are other degree requirements. You could also work on these or petition these when you're studying abroad. But again, for today's presentation, I'll be focusing on the 3 foundations that we just covered. And this is also different from things like major and minor requirements, unit minimum requirements, or even something like senior residency requirement. And for the record, one of the things that I want to highlight, often students think that they cannot study abroad their senior year because of senior residency requirement. And when you're studying abroad on a UCEAP program, which is one of the most popular programs when students study abroad during the academic year, there are different rules that apply. So many students, senior residency requirement, it might not be the thing that prevents you from studying abroad your senior year. There might be other things, but don't let, this particular requirement dissuade you. Definitely ask your advisors questions. So can I complete GEs abroad? I think it might already be evidence from the title of our session and the fact that there's a presentation dedicated to this, but the answer is absolutely you can complete GEs on a study abroad program. Now, before continuing, we'll have a quick pause here. As part of our Global Learning Opportunities Week, GLOW, we are hosting a keyword scavenger hunt each day this week for a chance to enter and win a $75 gift card. Today's keyword of the day is cenote. If you don't know what a cenote is, I strongly encourage you to look it up and explore these amazing wonders of the world. Please visit our event homepage, ieo.ucla.edu/glow, where you can submit the keyword of the day. You have to do it by end of day today for that chance to enter today's prize. So back to our regular scheduled programming. Why attempt GEs abroad? So first, obviously this would entail studying abroad outside of your major. Students are not obligated to study abroad in their major. Students can work on GEs, minor, foreign language, tech breadth. I've already shared some of this with you, and you're still making progress towards your degree. You're not falling behind because you're still satisfying these requirements. Often students come to us asking something like, I'm a psychology major, what study abroad program do I need to do, or what study abroad program can I do? And that makes it difficult to sort of respond, because I would say that most study abroad programs are not designed around a particular major. There are some definitely that are designed around specific majors, but most of them are not. So there's not necessarily going to be a flurry of opportunities that say such and such program for psychology or such and such program for history students. In fact, you might find simply that says University College London, and at University College London, you could take psychology courses, you could take history courses. So I share this so that students can expand their search beyond, something that's a program for your major. Now, why would you want to do GEs abroad? I think the most important reason is to make academic progress, not falling behind on any degree requirements that you have. Another component is flexibility. To be honest, being able to sort of hold off some of these GEs to study abroad, it may determine when you can study abroad, or where you can study abroad, or whether even you go abroad. Some students might have a more structured degree or a much more structured major that makes it more difficult to study abroad, say during the academic year. But on the other hand, if they were to work on their GEs abroad, that could offer some of that flexibility. Another is essentially the coursework that you would be doing abroad. There are students that go abroad and just take nothing but major related courses, and there's students that do nothing but GE related coursework. So that also offers you the flexibility. And by the way, there's also an in-between. You can do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So that also determines sort of what you want to be focusing abroad. How do I find GEs on study abroad programs? So this is where it gets a little bit tricky, and it's an exploratory process. I'll start off with one of the easiest ways. If essentially, once you explore the UCLA Study Abroad 101 session, you'll understand what these terms mean in more detail. But UCLA Travel Study, those are the UCLA faculty-led programs. And the UCLA Global Cities program, that cohort one where you go abroad and the cohort comes back to UCLA, these are the most straightforward because on their program pages, what you see is what you get. Each individual program will tell you the courses that are offered, and it'll already tell you this course satisfies this GE, that course satisfies, that GE. So that's pretty straightforward. That's pretty easy. If you're not trying to explore anything, too complicated, that might be one of the most straightforward opportunities. Both of those programs are summer based. Now, UCEAP also offers summer programs, but they're the ones that offer the programming during the academic year. This does require a bit more researching and petitioning, but it is quite common. So, I hope that you don't think that this is daunting. In this coming slides, there's going to be two components that I'll highlight. One, I'll start off with a new tool, which is the UCLA-UCEAP Credit Abroad Catalog. And after that, I'll go more into the sort of the lengthy process of how to identify GEs and petition GEs from a study abroad program. So the UCLA UCAP Credit Abroad database is what I just said. It's a database of information that we receive from the registrar that has a collection of which courses UCLA students have taken for specific credit on a UCEAP program. Here's a quick link to that database, bit.ly/UCLA credit, all under lowercase. Do look at the disclaimer because the most important thing that students should get from this is that there is no guarantee of future approvals. This is a historical database, but it is a way for you to explore what has been approved so that when you do reach out to your department, you have a better sense of what kind of programs you might be able to look for. Also, if you don't see anything on here, don't be discouraged. This is simply, if you see something, be encouraged by it. But if you don't see something, it just means that nobody has petitioned that. So if there's a new program, you're not going to find data here. So don't be discouraged. So once you read the disclaimer on your own, you're going to click submit. And I'll explain a little bit on how to best search for GEs in this catalog. First, you want to select your school. The example that I'll use today is going to be engineering. So you want to select the School of Engineering. And this is important because the GE approvals are tied to specific schools. If something gets approved for School of Engineering, it doesn't mean that it would be approved for the Letters in Science or Schools Arts and Architecture. So do select your individual school. Beyond that, you don't have to select a specific major. And that is, if something got approved for an aerospace engineer, it would be equally approved for a bioengineer, chemical engineer. So it doesn't really matter the major. So do leave that open when looking for GEs. And by the way, this is a tool that you can also look for where students have gotten major and minor credit. In which case, then yes, you would be selecting individual majors and then you select the credit type. But for GEs, again, just stick to the school and don't select a major here. Next category is going to be the general education requirement. After that, I encourage students to leave the country open just to see sort of what's out there and not limit yourself to any particular country. But of course, if you're already set on specific countries, feel free to multiple select the countries here. Partner institution, unless you're looking at a very specific school, leave it open because it's not always as intuitive and you might be able to you might be missing specific offerings in a specific destination if you start limiting the partner institution. When it comes to UCEAP subject, that's also not always as clear whether it's going to satisfy one particular GE category or not. So I also encourage you to leave the UCEAP subject open. After that, you click search and this is what it's going to look like. You're going to get this listing. And so essentially the way that this reads, ignore the individual major because all this means is an engineering student. So in engineering, I'll use the first line as an example. An engineering student studied abroad in 2018 at Pontifical Catholic University of Chile. They took this anthropology course on South American indigenous language and they petitioned successfully for credit for the philosophical and linguistic analysis GE. Another example, I'll use the last one on here. Another engineering student, doesn't matter that they're mechanical engineers, they studied abroad at the University of Melbourne in 2017, and they took this health science course called Living Longer, and they were able to successfully petition it and get credit for the life science GE. So what do you do with this information? The next step would be to Google or search the term UCEAP plus the individual partner institution, or consult with an EAP staff. What you want to do next is, browse the individual programs and see, is this coursework still available and offered? Because these courses may not be offered any longer. Remember, this is a historical record that goes back about 5 years. And the next step after that, once you identify, okay, these courses are generally still available on this program, is petitioning them with your individual college or school to confirm that they're still willing to give credit for this specific GE requirement. And again, if it's been approved here, generally that means you're on the right track, but again, not a guarantee. Sometimes if they approve something as a one-off approval for something that was an extenuating circumstance, there would be a record of it here, which is why, again, we cannot guarantee that these approvals will still maintain, and the departments don't have to be tied to the data that you see on here. It's just a guiding tool. If there's not, and again, if you see something in the credit abroad database, that's awesome. That means you identified something that you can use. But if you don't see it, again, don't be discouraged. It just means no one has either petitioned it or approved it for that specific program. In which case, we're going to move on to the lengthy and more traditional way to do some detective work on how to identify GEs on a study abroad program. The first step, it might be a more obvious one, but you want to identify your missing GE categories using your DARs. What is it that you still have, pending that you haven't completed? If you still don't have a good idea or inkling of, what is historical analysis and what could, satisfy the historical analysis GE, if that's one of the ones that you have that's outstanding, then you would take step number 2. Look at the courses that satisfy that category. I've included here a bit.ly link, / UCLA-GE Master. That sort of, it's a course, a master course list of the UCLA courses that satisfy these individual GE categories. Once you explore through these, I think you'll have a better idea of the type of course that could satisfy that missing GE category by identifying patterns. Step 3 would be then to pick a program and browse courses. As you're browsing through courses, you want to ask yourself things like, are there courses that you would think that could fit the G category that you need? Don't look at the title alone. Sometimes the title might imply a philosophy-related course that you might think for philosophical analysis. But as you look at the description, it turns out that it might really be a history course. So you want to go a little bit deeper than titles. You are not required to find an exact UCLA course abroad, although if you did find something that matches a GE that we already have here, you might be on a better track to petitioning. But just know that you're not tied to that. Again, you want to tie it more to the concepts of these GEs: historical analysis, visual and performing arts, rather than specific UCLA courses. Once you think you might have a couple of leads, now you want to dig a little bit deeper. Step 4 would be to find a detailed syllabus, or as detailed syllabus as possible. Ideally, these are the 3 core things that the departments usually want to see. They want to see a syllabus that has learning outcomes and objectives, readings and texts, and week-by-week breakdown of the lessons and activities. You're not always going to find these because the syllabus is definitely an American concept, and a lot of universities abroad might not be sort of accustomed to this syllabus structure, and you might not find any of these. But again, in an ideal setting, you want to identify a syllabus that does have these things. Other supporting evidence that are ideal for a syllabus would be to have information like the department name, the course number or title, the instructor contact information, assessment, and credit hours. Again, if you don't have all of these, it's okay. The more information you have, the better chance you have to successfully petitioning for GE credit. In the absence of a traditional syllabus, as I've already hinted at, you want to find as much information as possible. The more you have, the better they can, the more information they have to assess this substitution petition that you're requesting. In some cases, you might want to consider writing to the faculty member abroad and politely letting them know, I'm interested in studying abroad at your institution. I cannot find a syllabus. My school's asking for, these particular topics for your course? Would you be able to, put together a memo on your letterhead so that I can petition this course with my school? Uh, Final step here is actually submitting the petition to your college or your school for review. On the petition, you want to indicate which specific GE you're hoping to substitute. Something that's probably not going to fly is if you were to outline something like, what GE will this course satisfy? They, they might send it back to you and ask you to just be more specific. So a better petition is going to look like, I would like to satisfy the historical analysis GE using this course from this institution, and here's the syllabus. That's the kind of petition you want to submit. Now, some students might be asking themselves, can I submit multiple petitions? For the most part, most schools and colleges discourage that. There are a few that are actually, very open to that. If you don't know what you're going to petition, or, you're looking at 3 classes for historical analysis, do connect with your college or school advisors first to let them know what you're thinking. And, they might be able to give you some guidance on how to narrow down those petitions or those courses. So do consult with them early. One thing that I want to stress is that this whole process is a petition process. I said, from the get-go, it is a common process. Students are quite successful with this, but a petition does not mean that it's a guarantee of approval. So, you could do this after you study abroad, but I certainly encourage students to start this process before you study abroad, and even as you're exploring. That way, that the programs that you're exploring are the programs that are going to, be able to satisfy your GE requirements. A petition is a request, not a guarantee of approval. To summarize here, the steps, because I know it's a lot of information, you want to identify that you're missing GEs. If you're not familiar with the categories, look at the courses to get a sense of what these categories mean. Pick a program, browse through their courses, find a syllabus, or as much information as you can, and then you submit your petition to your school and college to see if those courses will satisfy the GEs that you're seeking. A couple of notes on a few of the categories for historical and social analysis. Keep in mind that it's not just learning about history or just learning about society. The school or your colleges are looking for an analysis component, and I think that's one of the key things that they wanted us to share with you all. For philosophical and linguistic analysis, if you're looking at the study of theorists, ethics, morality, you're on the right track. If you're looking at different types of a course that focuses on different types of languages, their origins, the study of or the structure, you're also on the right track. Think of a linguistics sort of introduction to linguistics course. On the other hand, logic courses are not courses that typically satisfy GEs, and specific foreign languages are also not courses that satisfy GEs. So something like French 1, Italian 2, German 100 are not going to, these are courses that focus on the actual practicing and learning of the language. Those are not going to satisfy something like linguistic analysis. On the literary and cultural analysis GE, keep in mind that there is a focus on the works of literature and the analysis of texts, and how culture is embodied in these literary genres. It could be plays, so it's not just traditional books. It could be plays and just any kind of text. Some students often think that by looking at the word culture, that if you find a culture course, that this would be a good way to petition for literary and culture analysis. I've been told that those kinds of courses would probably be more appropriate for the social analysis GE. So again, this LCA has a focus on literature and text. For visual and performing arts, you have the history and appreciation of theater, music, arts, film, TV, and related media. On the other hand, skill development like piano courses, ballet courses, or performance generally would not count towards GE requirements. So when and how to actually, conduct the petition once you've already done your research. There is a now and there is a later component. Our strong recommendation is not to wait until you are abroad. Consult your respective college, school during the planning stage. Your school advisors can certainly offer some review of the proposed coursework that you have in mind, and update your college and school of any changes as you're discussing these plans. Once you're abroad, sometimes those Those plans might fall through, courses suddenly no longer offered, or you weren't able to get into a particular class. At that point, you do want to reconsult with your college and school as soon as possible, so that they can advise you on any alternative courses or give you advice on any change of plans. And the last component is after your program. Once you finalize your petition, you will need the pre-petition coursework will not be automatic. It's not going to automatically show up on your DARS again, unless you went through UCLA travel study that, you see what you get. But with UCAP coursework, once your coursework posts on your DARS, you will have to go back to your department and say, hey, we reviewed this coursework, I've completed it, here's this final syllabus, everything stayed the same, and they would finalize that petition for you. Now I'm going to move on to the last components of our session, and these are just a few tips from the individual colleges and schools that you might pertain to. So the college, which encompasses the CAC, honors, AAP, and athletics, before going abroad, they have what's called the advisory petition process. This is where you submit a blue petition via the message center. Here's the link for that process. And you're going to receive a response within 10 to 15 working days via My UCLA. The responses that you're going to receive depends on what action is taken. If you did this process after you actually studied abroad, you would, and if everything was successful, you'd get an approved after your courses has posted on your DARS if that was approved. If you go through the before going abroad process, you're going to get a provisional approval, assuming everything goes through. And this is the conditional, something that you would do prior to taking the coursework. If it's denied, it would be because it didn't satisfy the requirements, or there wasn't sufficient units. And if there's no action, it means they'll require more information from you. For the School of Engineering, this is the course evaluation process. They recommend that you submit it about 1 month in advance from when you need the final decision. Here is a link on where you would do that. They have a form on there, and everything's done through the message center. The one ask that they have for engineering students is that they submit their PDF actual form and any syllabi as separate PDFs. School of Engineering is one of the schools that does encourage students to submit multiple courses as backup options. Again, don't submit 10 for one historical analysis GE. I would encourage students to be a bit measured with their petitioning. One thing that the School of Engineering did say is that they would not evaluate econ or psych courses, as they're generally not acceptable UCLA GEs. The School of Theater and Film Television, there were no special notes that they provided us. So if you have any questions, I would simply say contact your respective TFT advisor. School of Arts and Architecture, there were also no special notes that we received. So if you have any questions, please contact your respective Arts and Architecture advisor. School of Public Affairs. If you are a pre-major, simply follow the college procedures, the College of Letters and Science. Public Affairs will honor any granted approvals that you received while you were pre-major from the college. Those that are actually in the public affairs majors, through the study abroad planning phase, there is a required form that they have, and it's through that form where you would be doing that petitioning process, and they review coursework with you. After the program, there is a formal petition that you have to submit with your syllabi. For this, I would just encourage you to connect with your major advisor to learn a little bit more of that process. We have a new education major as a part of the School of Education. For them, they simply ask that you submit your GE petitions to Elaine Delalas or Vanessa Hermoso via the Message Center. They do encourage students to use the GSE and INS petition template, which can be found at this bit.ly link. So /GSEIS petition, caps and lowercase. School of Music, there is an academic petition for GE substitutions, and here is the link, bit.ly /UCLA Music GE, that you can fill out and submit to them. Final component related to all of these schools and colleges is an important concept of understanding the difference between the transferring of coursework and satisfying requirements. So your college or school will bring up a phrasing that reads something like, if courses transfer to UCLA. Sometimes this wording makes students nervous because then, they start thinking, well, will my courses transfer? And transferring does not mean satisfying requirements. Those are two independent processes at UCLA. So just to give you a brief overview, the UCLA travel study programs, the ones with UCLA professors, these are UCLA courses. So there is no need to transfer. So you're 100% okay there. The courses will not, they're already here. With UCEAP, you get UC coursework. And I can tell you, this is one of the few things that I can guarantee, everything on UCEAP is 100% guaranteed to transfer to UCLA. UCLA Global Cities, the coursework that you'll see would have already been pre-approved by the registrar to transfer to UCLA. So you're also good to go there. The only one you want to be cautious about is if you go on a program that's not affiliated with a UC program, with the UC system. That would be a non-UC program. Unfortunately, there's no guarantee. There will never be a guarantee that courses will transfer to UCLA. On the other hand, we have experience working with students in these cases, and provided that a student goes to an accredited institution that's recognized by UCLA, and you take one of the the type of coursework that would be reasonably offered at UCLA, say it's history, engineering, public affairs, political science, students should be okay. Again, you'll never have that guarantee, but that means that you're on the right track of coursework to transfer to UCLA. The final step is after studying abroad. So this is for everybody that's petitioning coursework. You want to follow up. Courses that were petitioned prior to your program start will not automatically satisfy the degree requirements. So you do want to follow up to update your DARS, because it is a manual process for your advisors. So we're concluding our session here. The last things that I want to leave you off is more of the communication with our office. We encourage you to join our email newsletter. You can use the QR code or the bit.ly link to receive updates from our office. Sometimes that might be application deadlines that are coming up, scholarship applications, specific programs that we're highlighting. So if you're interested in that kind of information, do join our newsletter. And our contact information. Historically, we've been in Murphy Hall 1332, but with our safer at home guidelines that we have at UCLA, we are working remotely. So the best way to get a hold of us is email. That's info@ieo.ucla.edu. But during this pandemic times, we are offering virtual advising. You can learn more about the schedule for this and how to take advantage of that at our website /contact. Where we do drop in advising Monday through Thursday. If you just have any general question, you can just drop in and talk to one of our advisors. If you do have are seeking more of a one-on-one advising session, we do offer those. They're either our advisors are either assigned by regions, specific countries, or specific programs. And then those are more appropriate for a student that has already explored our websites a little bit, has already some feel for what they're looking at, but now they want to compare two programs, or they want to learn a little bit more in detail about a specific program. Also follow us in social media. So if you're not on the listserv, this is another way to get updates from our office. And this wraps up our Satisfying GEs Abroad session. Thank you for logging in. We hope that we've made navigating GEs on study abroad programs a bit easier for you all. If you have questions about specific programs, scholarships, financial aid, or student identities, we encourage you to explore the other GLOW sessions that dive a little bit more into detail of these topics. This GE session builds upon the 101 session. Again, if you didn't get a chance to view that one, do look it over to get the basics of study abroad. You'll be able to rewatch the session here on our YouTube channel. If there are other sections you want to look over or links you wish to re-access. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope the UCLA IEO can help you navigate study abroad a little bit better during your time here at UCLA. Have a good day.